Good morning, students. I am Riya Sinha, your SST teacher. Today, we are going to discuss chapter number 5 of history, that is New Kings and Kingdoms. In this chapter, we will discuss about different kingdoms and about the lifestyle and way of administration of different kings. So let's start the chapter now. Here first topic is given, how some men became rulers. At that time there were no voting system or there were no election, so how they would decide that who would rule them in the future. So choosing leaders or rulers by voting is something that has become common during the last 50 years or so. So how did men become rulers in the past? Most important question is that who can rule them, how they would decide. Some of the Rajas we read about in chapter 4 were probably chosen by the Jan, the people. But around 3000 years ago, we find some changes taking place in the ways in which Rajas were chosen. Some men now become recognized as Rajas by performing very big sacrifices. Means around 3000 years ago, if someone wanted to be a ruler or Raja, then they had to perform big sacrifices. The Ashwamedh or horse sacrifice was one such ritual. Now here a term has given Ashwamedh or horse sacrifice. A horse was let loose to wander freely and it was guarded by the Raja's men. If the horse wandered into the kingdom of other Rajas and they stopped it, then they had to fight. And if they allowed the horse to pass, then it meant that they accepted that the Raja who wanted to perform the sacrifice was stronger than them. So these Rajas were then invited to the sacrifice, which was performed by specially trained priests who were rewarded with gifts. The Raja who organized the sacrifice was recognized as being very powerful, and all those who came brought gifts for him. So this is the procedure of Ashwamedh or horse sacrifice. Then the Raja was a central figure in these rituals, obviously. So he often had a special seat, a throne or a tiger skin. His charioteer, who was his companion in the battlefield and witnessed his exploits, chanted tales of his glory. Obviously his charioteer was his companion because throughout the battle he was the only person there who was continuously with Raja. So he witnessed all his exploits and whatever glory he had gained there, he can tell to the audience. His relatives, especially his wives and sons, had to perform a variety of minor rituals. The other Rajas were simply spectators who had to sit and watch the performance of the sacrifice only. Priests performed the rituals, including the sprinkling of sacred water on the king, and the ordinary people, the Vish or Vaishya, also brought gifts. However, some people, such as those who were regarded as Shudra by the priest, were excluded from many rituals. Here we had discussed about some of the terms like Vaishya and Shudra. Now first of all we will learn Varna system. What were these? What were Shudra? What were Vaishya? So first of all we will discuss about it. See, Varns. We may have many books that were composed in North India, especially in the areas drained by the Ganga and the Yamuna during this period. So these books are often called latter Vedic because they were composed after the Rig Ved, about which we have learned in the previous chapter. So these include the Samved, Yajurved and Atharved as well as other books. These were composed by the priests and described how rituals were to be performed. And they also contained rules about society. So in these books, there were several different groups in societies at this time: priests and warriors, farmers, herders, traders, craftspersons, laborers, fishing folks, and forest people. Some priests and warriors were rich, as were some farmers and traders. Others, including many herders, craftspersons, and laborers, and fishing folk, and hunter-gatherers, were poor. So according to these books, the priests divided people into 4 groups called Varnas. And according to them, each one had a different set of functions. The first one was that of the Brahman. Brahmins were expected to study and teach the Vedas, perform sacrifices and receive gifts. In the second place were the rulers, also known as Kshatriyas. They were expected to fight battles and protect people. Third were the Vish or Vaishya. They were expected to be farmers, herders and traders. Both the Kshatriya and Vaishya could perform sacrifices. Here, till now we have learnt about 3 group of societies or 3 group of segregation in the society. First one is Brahman, who used to teach Vedas and study Vedas and perform sacrifices and receive gifts. Second one is rulers or Kshatriyas. They were expected to fight battles and protect people. Third were the Vish or the Vaishya, and they were expected to be farmers, herders and traders, and both the Kshatriya and Vaishya could perform sacrifices. After Brahman, Kshatriya and Vaishya, last were the Shudras, who had to serve the other 3 groups and could not perform any rituals. Often women were also grouped with the Shudra. Both women and Shudra were not allowed to study the Vedas. Women were not the segregation of the Varna system, but they were also considered equal to Shudra. They were not allowed to study the Vedas. The priest also said that these groups were decided on the basis of birth. For example, if one's father and mother were Brahmins, one would automatically become a Brahman and so on. And later they classified some people as untouchable also. These included some craftspersons, hunters and gatherers, as well as people who helped perform burials and cremations. The priest said that contact with these groups was polluting. Even many people did not accept the system of Varna laid down by the Brahmins, but some kings thought they were superior to the priest. Others felt that birth could not be a basis for deciding which Varna people belonged to. And besides, some people felt that there should be no differences amongst people based on occupation. Others felt that everybody should be able to perform rituals, and others condemned the practice of untouchability. Also, there were many areas in the subcontinent, such as the northeast, where social and economic differences were not very sharp and where the influence of the priest was limited. Now, why did people oppose the system of Varnas? Obviously, because some of them felt that everybody should be equal. We people are not the one who can classify them as who is the superior and who is inferior among them. So those who understand these things earlier also, they used to oppose this system. Now see, next topic here is Janpads. The Rajas who performed these big sacrifices were now recognized as being Rajas of Janpads, rather than Jans. The word Janpad literally means the land where the Jan set its foot and settled down. It is basically a combination of two words. Jan means people and Pad means foot. So the land where the people set its foot and settle down, it is considered as Janpads. Some important Janpads are shown in the map. Archaeologists have excavated a number of settlements in these Janpads, such as Purana Kila in Delhi, Hastinapur near Meerut, and Antranjikera near Etah. These both are in Uttar Pradesh. They found that people lived in huts and kept cattle as well as other animals. They also grew a variety of crops like rice, wheat, barley, pulses, sugarcane, sesame and mustard. So they made earthen pots also even. Some of these were grey in color, others were in red, and one special type of pottery found at these sites is known as painted grey ware. As is obvious from the name, these grey pots had painted designs, usually simple lines and geometric patterns. See, these painted grey ware are grey pots which had painted designs, usually simple lines and geometric patterns. Okay, now next topic is Mahajanpads. Now you all can guess what is the meaning of Mahajanpad, as you have earlier learned the meaning of Janpads. So about 2500 years ago, some Janpads became more important than others and were known as Mahajanpads. Those Janpads who became more important than the others, they were considered as Mahajanpads. See, some Mahajanpads were also there in the map. Most Mahajanpads had a capital city, and many of these were fortified. Fortified means that huge walls of wood, brick or stone were built around them. Forts were probably built because people were afraid of attacks from other kings and needed protection. So it is also likely that some rulers wanted to show how rich and powerful they were by building really large, tall and impressive walls around their cities. Also in this way, the land and the people living inside the fortified area could be controlled more easily by the king. So building such huge walls required a great deal of planning. Thousands, if not lakhs of bricks or stones had to be prepared, and this in turn meant enormous labor provided possibly by thousands of men, women and children. And resources had to be found for all of this. Basically, the new Rajas now began maintaining armies also. Soldiers were paid regular salaries and maintained by the king throughout the year. Even some payments were probably made using punch-marked coins. Start a new topic, that is taxes. In this topic, we will discuss about the tax system at that time. As the rulers of the Mahajanpads were building huge forts and maintaining big armies, as we have discussed in the earlier class also, they needed more resources and they needed officials to collect these. So instead of depending on occasional gifts brought by people, as in the case of the Raja of the Janpads, they started collecting regular taxes. Now what kind of taxes were they used to collect? See, some of the taxes are given here. Taxes on crops were the most important at the time, and this was because most people were farmers. Usually the tax was fixed as at 1/6 of what was produced. Means whatever crops they used to produce at that time, its 1/6 part would be given as tax to the king. This was known as bhag or a share. Second one is taxes on craft persons as well, and these could have been in the form of labor. For example, a weaver or a smith have had to work for a day every month for the king. Third is taxes on herders. They were also expected to pay taxes in the form of animals and animal produce. There were also taxes on goods that were bought and sold through trade. And hunters and gatherers also had to provide forest produce to the Raja. Now, changes in agriculture. What kind of changes we have seen in agriculture at that time? So there were two major changes in agriculture around this time. One was the growing use of iron plowshares. This meant that heavy clay soil could be turned over better than with a wooden plowshare, so that more grain could be produced. This one is the first changes that we have seen around this time. Means heavy clay soil could be turned over better than with a wooden plowshare, so that more grain could be produced. And the second is people began transplanting paddy. This meant that instead of scattering seed on the ground from which plants would sprout, saplings were grown and then planted in the fields. This led to increased production as many more plants survived. However, it was back-breaking work. Generally, slave men and women, means das and dasi, and landless agricultural laborers known as kamakars had to do this work. They used to produce saplings of paddy and then transplant it into the field. They never used to scatter seeds directly in the field. Okay, now a closer look Magad. Now we are going to discuss about different Mahajanpads. Magad became the most important Mahajanpad in about 200 years. Many rivers such as the Ganga and Son flowed through Magad, and this was important for transport, water supplies, and making the land fertile. Obviously, rivers are very important for any place if someone wants to settle there. So parts of Magad were forested. Elephants which lived in the forest could be captured and trained for the army. Forest also provided wood for building horses, carts, and chariots. Besides, there were iron ore mines in the region that could be tapped to make strong tools and weapons. So, Magad had basically two very powerful rulers. First is Bimbisar and the second is Ajatsattu, who used all possible means to conquer other Janpads. Mahapadmananda was another important ruler. First, listen, Magad, there were two important rulers. First of all, we have seen first is Bimbisar and the second is Ajatsattu, and then Mahapadmananda. So Mahapadmananda extended his control up to the northwest part of the subcontinent. Rajgiri, which is present-day Rajgir in Bihar, was the capital of Magad for several years. And later the capital was shifted to Patliputra, which is the present-day Patna. So, first capital of Magad was Rajgir. At that time it was pronounced as Rajgiri, and the second one capital after that shifted to Patliputra, which is present day Patna. More than 2300 years ago, a ruler named Alexander, who lived in Macedonia in Europe, wanted to become a world conqueror. And of course, he didn't conquer the world, but did conquer some parts of Egypt and West Asia and came to the Indian subcontinent, reaching up to the banks of the Bias. But when he wanted to march further eastward, his soldiers refused. They were scared, as they had heard that the rulers of India had vast armies of foot soldiers, chariots and elephants. So they decided to return from there. Okay, now next topic is a closer look, Vajji. While Magad became a powerful kingdom, Vajji, with its capital at Vaishali, which was also in Bihar, was under a different form of government known as Jan or Sangh. Now, what do you mean by Jan or Sangh? Jan is used for a group that has many members, and Sangh means organization or association. So, in a Jan or Sangh, there were not one but many rulers. And sometimes, even when thousands of men ruled together, each one was known as a Raja. These Rajas performed rituals together. They also met in assemblies and decided what had to be done and how through discussion and debate. For example, if they were attacked by an enemy, they met to discuss what should be done to meet the threat. However, women dasas and kamakars could not participate in these assemblies. Both the Buddha and Mahavir belong to Jan or Sangh, and some of the most vivid descriptions of the life of Sangh can be found in Buddhist books, which we will discuss in the next chapter. Rajas of powerful kingdoms tried to conquer the Sangh, and nevertheless these lasted for a very long time, till about 1500 years ago, when the last of the Jan or Sangh were conquered by the Gupta rulers. See, this is an account of the Vajji from the Digha-Nyaka, a famous Buddhist book which contains some of the speeches of the Buddha, and these were written down about 2300 years ago. Ajatasattu and the Vajjis. Ajatasattu wanted to attack the Vajjis. He sent his minister named Vasakara to the Buddha to get his advice on the matter. The Buddha asked whether the Vajjis met frequently in full assemblies, and when he heard that they did, he replied that the Vajjis would continue to prosper as long as they held full and frequent assemblies. They met and acted together. They followed established rules. They respected, supported, and listened to elders. Vajji women were not held by force or captured. Chatte or local shrines were maintained in both towns and villages, and wise saints who followed different beliefs were respected and allowed to enter and leave the country freely.